So who wants to start? Anybody can just chime in whenever. But the very first question is, who are you? Who wants to answer who they are first? And by who are you, I mean, like, who are you as a person that parents don't know about and you want them to know about, right? And I know, and you don't have to share too much if you don't want to, but like, I feel like sometimes when parents know a particular thing about you, they like humanize you, for lack of a better term, right? Whereas, like, wait a minute, you're not just this person that's with my kid all day.
Sure.
So how about, for the sake of,
Like, who are we outside the classroom?
or just who are you in terms of, like, do you have anything that you feel strongly about that, like, you could bring to the classroom? Or is there something that you, as a person, are like, I really like to skateboard, and, like, nobody knows that about me? Just anything interesting. And I guess we'll start left to right, because I like to play poker. Jenny, who are you besides Jenny?
Let's see. Things I would like to bring into the classroom. Well, my superhero power today was con calma, which means with calmness. And I really feel that for myself. I feel unflustered and unruffled a lot of the time, which I think is especially beneficial when working with very young children, where it is often chaos, controlled chaos, fun chaos. But I feel like that shows up in my everyday. But, something about me, too, that I think I like to use in the classroom is, like, I think I'm a good listener. So I really like to, like, hear my team, know what's important to them, and make it happen. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like you're definitely unflustered. As opposed to Django, who's always running around like a chicken with his head cut off. No, but you're super calm, and like it's inspiring, and it's kind of contagious. This like, right? It's one thing that I like to be mindful of now, like, especially as a performer. Sometimes just being like here is so much better, and like, I don't know, sometimes people think like, wow, you're so confident, and it might not even be confidence, but it's just this ability to like remain calm that people perceive as confidence.
Yeah.
And then it gives you a reputation, which is a great one to have. So yeah, I see that. I'm flustered. I also really like how when there is, especially like as an admin person who's like, we always kind of revert to you, one, because you're the closest in cloud.
In geography.
Yeah, right? Just like logistically, you're right there. But
Shortest
also
walk.
because you're somebody that we do trust to remain calm under, potential crises. Not that we wouldn't trust anybody else, we definitely would. But like, I don't know, you're a good first option, so I do really appreciate that.
Thanks.
Especially like now hearing the parents today after the panel being like, admin doesn't communicate enough, and like I hear it and I don't resent it, because I think a lot of the time we are away from the office, and we're in a classroom because we're doing whatever. So to now know that somebody can be in there and be like, now I can be that person that can be a front-facing person for a parent. So we're going to come to you some more. What made you want to work with children?
Oh, gosh, initially, let me think. It was so long ago. I think I started working with young children in 2008. And to be perfectly honest, I think like my friends in college were working at an early learning center, and I was like, I want to be where they are.
Check it out.
At the time, I think I was studying like marketing, and before that I had studied Spanish, and I just was kind of bopping around majors and life choices and trying to figure out like what to do. And then I started working in this early learning center because I knew people that worked there, and everything clicked, and I changed my major to elementary education, which is what I ended up studying, and I have not left the early learning field since. So I feel like a lot of us have a similar experience where you like fall into the field, and then you realize how good it is, and you carry on with it. So I feel like it was a really lucky coincidence, but I'm glad it happened.
Yeah, well, we are too.
Yeah.
Now, Jamie, who are you? I feel like the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland. Who are you? But
There's
similar,
actually a tree out back that looks just like Alice in
Really?
Wonderland tree, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure it was
I took like
carved at the
75
center.
pictures.
Someone's climbing that tree tomorrow for sure.
I wanted to, but I was like, probably shouldn't.
Hopefully it's tomorrow, not tonight,
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a thunderstorm tonight.
What?
It's supposed to rain for the next couple days.
Wow.
Today was the
She's
day.
dodging the question.
I am.
we don't have to. We can talk about
no, that's
thunderstorms.
fine.
I love thunder.
Let's see, who am I? Well, a lot of my parents already know that I'm a parent outside of being an educator. A lot of them don't know that I'm a single parent. And it's not necessarily one of those things that I choose not to broadcast, or it's just not a topic that comes up very often. Let's see, what else? I am a cheerleading coach as well. I've done that for a couple of years. And I don't know, I think currently what I'm working on is really trying to figure out that question, actually. Like, who am I? What does it look like outside of being a parent and an educator and somebody who dedicates their whole lives to others, like children, mainly children. Actually, it's like my whole life is children. So that's a question that I've been asking myself a lot as well.
I feel like sometimes that question is never answered, right? Like we don't know who we are sometimes the entirety of our lives.
Sure. It's like consistent character building, consistently. And what could be today could be different tomorrow, too.
I do have a question for you. So today, some parents who didn't come for different reasons, and that's okay. But one of the parents that was going to come is a single mom, and we did want to ask her specifically kind of that experience that they have as a single parent maneuvering Hilltop, and like what their experience is and their perspective is as a single mother. I honestly was apprehensive to ask that question because I didn't know if it was a little invasive, or sometimes people don't want to share that part of their lives because there's a stigma behind it, right? Like there's an association with being a single mom that maybe you're struggling, or maybe it's a little bit tougher, which I mean honestly, just from a like practical standpoint, if there's two parents, it's probably easier than one parent. But can you maybe talk about that? And is it invasive? Do you think it's like a little personal to ask, or and feel free not to if that's the case.
No, that's fine. I think that it can be invasive depending on the person that you're asking. So I think that in asking the person or sharing the questions beforehand is really helpful. For me, it doesn't feel invasive because I've talked about it so much. I feel like as a single mom, I get othered a lot, but also I see a lot of single dads get othered. So I think just single parentage in general is really othered these days. But it's also a really powerful thing that a lot of people choose not to speak on because it's either, well, is the dad in prison?
Sure,
Like what I get a lot from the girls is, do they have the same dad? That's the first question that people ask me, instead of, wow, how are you doing? Like, how are things, right? Or what are your favorite parts about being a single parent? Like it never goes there. It's more so about, well, what happened?
Yeah, what's the struggle like?
It's all about the negative.
That's fair,
So I think I would love to hear more parents that are single, or like single parents, come up and say what it's like to navigate being in Hilltop, because it's different. As an educator, it's one way, but as a parent, it's different too. A lot of the times when I go to pick up the girls, and I've just left my classroom and I head straight over to Fremont to go and get the girls, I have to immediately take off one hat and put on the other hat. Sometimes I have to put right back on my other hat if somebody has a question for me in the classroom, and like it's a balance. And a lot of the times, a lot of educators don't necessarily think about this person coming in and what they're coming in as, like what are they showing up as. They don't know the stress that parent has been through already, and stress is one of those things. I'm not saying that all single parents have stress, because that's not true, but it's a possibility that they're coming in with stress. And so when you come into the door and you're beat down with, your child did this thing today, and we really got to talk about this thing, and it's like repetitive, it's over and over again, it can feel a little bit stressful, because it's like, it's one of those things that you kind of wish that you could go to the other parent and be like, I am so beat up and tired, can you help me with this thing? But you don't get that. You get to go into the car and you get to look in the mirror and say, what are we going to do? What are you going to do to help your children through this thing, through this need? And how are you also going to meet your own needs in this? So it can be hard. And it can be hard also to see other parents that are like, oh, it's fine, I'm going to go on a trip to Cabo and the kids are going to stay home with the husband. And you're like, girl, take me. Like, can you take me and my kids,
Isn't
please?
That nice?
Thank you. So, I mean, it can be hard, but also it's a nice remembrance that I'm doing hard work, and I'm doing hard work that's going to benefit to incredible humans down the road. and one day maybe I'll go to Cabo as well with my children. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those, it's a mindset that you have to put yourself into. And it's hard. It's a hard mindset. And it's a hard mindset if not a lot of people understand it. And I think I think there is an invasive question. I mean, there's multiple, but the one that I get the most in being at Hilltop is, how do you do it? And it's like, and I don't know if it's just because, I can't tell if I'm just being sensitive about the question, or if it's like, are you curious to know how I'm doing it, or are you asking me, like, how is this person possible of doing it?
Yeah, right? The assumption is that, like, you shouldn't be able to do it.
Correct.
Right?
Like, is it because I'm a woman that you're feeling like I'm not able to carry the weight of a household by myself? And if the roles were reversed, would you ask the same question? Or, there's that piece to it too. But it can be hard. I think that for me, though, it's been a little bit easier because I'm part of faculty, right? I'm part of faculty. People know me. So a lot of people will, they've either asked me questions, or they'll take a step back and say, is it okay if I ask you this question about being a single parent, or are you feeling okay with this conversation? And it makes me wonder about the other single parents. Are we also giving them that same lens? Like, are we also filtering or giving them this space to say, I'm not okay with that question? Or are we allowing them this space to come out and say, I'm stressed out about this thing and I really need to talk about it? Like, how are we preparing those parents for that conversation, if they're even needing it?
How would, one of the reasons, so I wasn't going to ask that question in particular because I think the identity of that parent is very, I guess, unique to Hilltop. And, I did not want to other them, right? I even told Darlene, I was like, let's skip that question. But I did want to, like, I guess, prod, or, like, how do I, like, ask an open-ended question that leads to that, right? It's like, how do we check in on you as a single parent, just to make sure whether you're thriving or whether you're, struggling? Like, how can we just be like, how are you? Is it just as easy as that? Just like, how are you? And then maybe the stuff will come out later, or like, what's the best way to kind of go about it?
Yeah, I think for me, the times that I feel less othered is when I'm treated the same. It's kind of like when you see children talking about race, or they notice a race, and a parent goes, shh, don't say anything. It's kind of the same thing. It's like, oh, I see that mom is walking down the street with 2 kids. Shh, don't say anything. There's no man there. This must be something that hurts her, right?
Yeah.
So the more that we shush about it, or the more that we stray from this conversation, I fear that it's just going to continue to go down that rabbit hole of this feels like it's supposed to be something bad. But I do think that the best way to not other a single parent, at least for me, is just say, hey, how you doing? How you been doing? Or even having the real conversation of, hey, I know that you're a single parent, and I just want to shout it out that it's really great that, we see what you're doing. I think that a lot of times it's really easy to say, you're a single parent, you're doing great, but show more than that, or like say more than that. I see you showing up every single day, and if there's anything that we can do, let us know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the simple things, right? Like, it's just like when parents are coming in the door and you're greeting them. I mean, there's parents that are not single parents that are also stressed out.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And so it's like the same thing, checking in, hey, you doing okay? Is there anything that we can do for you, or anything like that? Educators, if they have a personal relationship with a parent, I would say definitely just give them the space, to open up on their own. I mean, I think that's, at least for me, that's my thing, because I am really willing to open up, but I have to feel safe to do that. So.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate you opening up. It's funny because, like, I feel like I know you just being a coworker, and like knowing your girls, and like knowing that you are, a cheer coach and they're in cheer, of like, my assumption honestly about you is that you're killing it, because I'm like, well, the fact that she hangs out with kids at work and then has her own girls, and then after work she does cheer, I'm like, she must be thriving, and like it must be something that she is capable of, and like, because she continues to seek out children, right, as opposed to kind of being like, well, I'm going to avoid children because it's tough and I already see it. So I will say that's my assumption. But I know that's different for many parents, and then too, just the stigma around kind of the gender part of being a single parent, right? Because like every time I notice a dad is a single parent, they kind of get that like empathy right away, and it's like, oh my God, like you're a single dad, you're amazing, how do you're doing so good, like, and it's always kind of like a shameful thing for maybe the partner that they don't have in their life. I think about a parent that we had last year at Fremont who like, he was so like sought after from other single parents as just like a romantic partner, right? Because they saw this like capable man who, he was raising this daughter on his own, and like they had, according to them, and my assumption as well, these qualities that maybe they were seeking, right? And like, I knew this man on a personal level, and like, he was a wreck. Like, he was struggling, and like, his daughter was amazing. He's an amazing person too, but like, he never got that same stigma because he was cool, because he's like a single dad. He's not supposed to be the one in the life of the child as much, right? So like, I do see the differences in gender. Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, just really quick, sorry to add to that.
Yeah.
I feel I've met a lot of men as single parents who also have been othered in a very similar way. One of my best friends, he has his child frequently, a lot more than most, if we're going by stigma, but he also is very much othered. He's held to this high standard that's like, you'll never be like the mom, you'll never be able to give enough like the mom can. And I don't know how we can break that. I don't know if that's possible to kind of take away this gender role idea that we have, because there's definitely some mothers that are not, and the father is the better option. That is a real thing. And I think about that often. I think about myself, obviously, but then I think about, God, and I know what it's like to be a single parent. So I'm like, I can't imagine what it's like to be a male single parent and not have the resources that I do, because in reality, as a single mother, as a woman, I have a lot more resources than the men do, and that's really unfortunate.
No, I hear that. I think even it's kind of a good transition to a male in this field, but like as myself as a male in early learning, there's that same stigma too of like, you shouldn't be in that field. When I first started working in early learning, I was almost a little embarrassed to like tell people, especially like men in my family, to be like, I'm working with children, and like the younger it gets, it seems like the perception is even more negative, right? Of like, wait, you're a babysitter, but you're a man, and it's like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, I got into this field, one, because I love it, because I think I'm good at it, but there is that stigma that I felt before, and like now I'm trying to break away from it. Even like when I first started working at Hilltop, I had a lot of like reservations and hesitation working in a program that did have infant care and toddler care, because I was always in an elementary school with first through fifth graders, kindergartners, and even then I avoided the kindergarten group because like my own kind of pride and my own, and I think a lot of it is insecurity maybe, but like I grew up in a very macho Mexican household, and like the woman stays at home and takes care of the children, and the man goes out and works not with children. And like now I realize, regardless of gender, it's super important, one, to be with children at such a young age to then be able to help their development along the way. But moving on, Django, how do you kind of, first of all, who are you, but also like how do you feel as a male in this field with some of these assumptions and kind of connotations that go with gender roles of children?
I think that's an important thing to address before I talk about who I am. And it's been many years. I've worked in this field for over 30 years, and when I first started, I was working with infants and toddlers. I just wanted a job, and I didn't want to work retail again. That totally sucked. I was not going back in that direction. And I just ran into a friend, and she said, "Oh, you should come work at my school." I was like, "Oh, a school?" I had no idea. And then I got there, and there's all these little babies rolling around the floor, and I'm like, "Oh, okay." I held babies before. I've been around kids. I was at a school with pregnant moms in high school, and I knew babies. I mean, at that point, I didn't even know if I was ever going to have kids of my own or not. I mean, I wasn't close to the idea or any open to that. I just had no clue. But I needed a job. And like Jenny, I just fell in love with the job, with kids and just the camaraderie. There's, having also worked in fields where there's a different kind of camaraderie, I can tell you just from my experience from working in like kitchen type jobs, dishwashing and stuff like that, and then retail, that the kind of camaraderie you feel, or I should say I feel in this field has been like no other. That being said, yes, I've experienced a lot of othering over the years, a lot of othering, and I totally identify with what you're saying about, like, oh, until I work with babies, you know, they're like, what are you doing working with babies? I mean, I remember that school. It was called Happiness Is. It's no longer there. And there was a parent who came in, and my director told me later that she didn't want to enroll her child because there was a guy working there.
Oh.
And at first I was just sort of stunned. I was like, this is 2001. What the heck's going on here? You know, like,
Al Gore's going to be
2001.
president.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, really? But it was an eye opener for me. I mean, it's not that I didn't know bias existed in the world, right? It's just that it had never like slapped me in the face. So
It's different when it actually happens to you, huh?
In such a real way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And, the other one that I heard pretty soon after that, or I don't know, it was so long ago, but was, oh, you're going to be such a great dad someday.
Yeah.
I heard this from moms all the time, never from dads. Yeah. They're like, hey, you want to go drinking? Oh, sure. But the moms were like, you're such a great dad. It was always like this, like, I felt like they were looking at me like a little puppy.
Yeah.
They wanted to like pet me on the head or something. You know? And it was, at first I was just, once again, kind of stunned, like, what's happening? What's happening here? This is my job. I take this seriously. Because at that point I was like, yeah, I'm gonna stick with this. I'm gonna see this through. And I got very involved in early childhood. And when I transitioned on to working with toddlers and infants to working in preschool, I became very passionate and got involved with advocacy and organizing, and I was part of the Worthy Wage Day organization, and after that, to be told, like, what a cute little puppy you are. Why don't you take you home and pinch your little ears? It was, and we call that othering now, but at the time it was just demeaning. It's just like all this work that I'm doing a lot of serious work here with these kids, and I'm learning a lot because I was still very young at the time.
Yeah, it's very profound, right? I think another thing too, as a male, is that there is this bias against males, but in the very accusatory tone, right? Like, I know for me, that's one thing. Even with some of the new staff, I had explicit conversations with them of like, don't sit children on your lap. Don't put yourself in the, we have the never alone with children rule for a reason, right? And that one, I think it varies on the age, but like a man won't necessarily get the same credit or the same understanding that a woman would, right? So it's like this thing of just protect yourself first and don't put yourself in a situation, only because, historically that just seems to be kind of the narrative that, has been, men are usually the oppressor in history, right? So it's this thing of like, you have to overcome that kind of stigma, but at the same time overcome the stigma they shouldn't be in the room with them to begin with, right? So it's tough and it's hard. Another thing too that happens a lot that I notice in myself is when the teacher struggles, maybe with some challenging behaviors with a student, and they're a woman, they struggle, and then I come in as a man, and for some reason they're just more likely to listen to me, right? Just maybe it's a tone thing. I've had this conversation last week with the teacher, and she was like, what did you do different? And I was like, honestly, I didn't do anything different than you did. If anything, you have the relationship with the child, and it should have worked, but I think just my tone as a male came off a little bit, harsher, a little bit more serious, that a kiddo was like, oh, he's serious, right? And it's like these things that like you have to be aware of one, to try and correct them, but at the same time, it's not give them too much airtime so it doesn't continue to be a thing, right? So, anyways, kind of changing the subject a little bit, who are you, kind of, Django, as a person, and like, why did you get into early learning besides the fact that you needed a job?
That was it. I mean, I didn't go
it.
out seeking it. It really was just sheer chance that I ran into this friend on that particular day, and her school was hiring.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea where I was going.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I was certain I wasn't going to college. I was, I just wanted to work. I wanted to make a living. I wanted to enjoy my life. I just didn't know that I was going to also enjoy a job, a career at that point. I know I know what it was going to be. Mm-hmm. I was just, I'm going to have a job for a year and see what happens. I was going to just stick this out and do whatever I could do to like hold on to a job for a long, because I had done seasonal work in retail. And I was like, I wanted something consistent, something that I could stick with and be proud of. Mm-hmm. That's all I really knew. And I was making a very simple request to the universe, and I had no idea that it would be granted in such a profound way and have such a lasting impact on my life, my outlook, my understanding of who I am, who people are. I think is another part of this journey in this job, is to understand humanity, who we are as human beings through our relationships with children. Has been epiphanal. I've had many revelations working in this field about who I am, who we are, and all of them have been mostly good. I can tell you that when I think about this question, the first thing I think of is that I'm a friend. Is that relationships matter. You have a lot of relationships you're born into, and you may have to fight yourself to free yourself of them if they're relationships that are not good. I mean, in my case, I was very lucky. I love my mom. I love my sister. I'm a child of a single parent, so I connect with everything that Jamie says. And I've always felt a little extra protectiveness over my single parents, not in an obvious way, but in a way that says, if they need an accommodation, I'm going to make it without judgment and without
because you could relate.
Meaning like, oh, do you need a little extra help?
Mm-hmm. That's such a beautiful way, Django. It's so beautiful to hear that, though, because it's like you see them, but you don't need to call them out for it.
They know who they are. I don't think that people understand that. Trust people to know who they are, even if they haven't completely figured it out yet. So when we're talking about this journey to know who we are, it's okay, I think, with humility to say, I know enough about myself to feel satisfied right now.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe tomorrow I'll feel a bit more. And maybe with my dying breath, I'll be like, ah.
That realization.
The last little bit.
What do you figure out?
It'll be like sparkles coming out.
Exactly.
Right at the end.
It's been a huge gift of working in this field and working with amazing people like Jamie and Jenny and so many people over the years. Some for long periods of time, others just a flash in the pan. Also, I'm as I said, I'm a brother, I'm a son, I'm a cousin, I'm an uncle. What else did I put here? That's it.
No, I mean, honestly, I'm really happy that you did find this field, because you're really good at it, and I mean that, and I'm very honest when I say that, because it's not easy working with children, and I see the work that you do with them, and I see how you engage with them, which is such a basic kind of skill. No, the skill itself is simple. It's simple but profound, right? Almost genius, right?
Yeah.
I think it's like the simplicity of, like, if you just engage children, you get so much further with them, and I see that skill in you, and I see your transitions when you're ninja mode activated, and I'm like, right, a lot of these things that doesn't come easy or basic or simple for some adults, and I think it does come easy and basic for you, because you're a genius in that way when working with children, in that, like, you figured out the simplicity of it, and you were able to kind of love it and treat it in a way that it deserves, as opposed to making it work for you, right? If anything, you made it work for them. If that made, like I think and I don't like using this word, but I think it's a blessing that you found this calling, because not so many people get to find their calling, and I do think it is your calling, which I think is also interesting, that I feel like a lot of maybe males. Well, I'm going to speak with my own experience here, but like it wasn't my intention to be a teacher. It wasn't my I graduated college, and I was going to be this like actor. That was my thing. I went to school for theater, and I was like, I don't care about anything else. I was even going to drop out of college, but I was like, well, I'm already here. Might as well, do something. And like, well, I was literally auditioning for things. I would go and work at a high school in LA because they would give me part-time work in between auditions, and I fell in love with it. And like, I worked at a high school for one assignment, and then I did a middle school, and I liked that even more. And then I had another assignment at elementary school, and I loved that the most. And it was like, this is kind of easy. This would be a good, side gig while my other gig takes off, right? And like, this took off for me instead, and like I found my calling. And I was speaking to Faraday about this with her son Arya, who's also really good at working with children, and like it comes easy to them. And it's this thing of like, don't ignore your calling sometimes, because it's more impactful on the lives of children. It's almost sacrificial, right? It's like, don't do what's best for Django, do what's best for the children. And I think at the same time, hopefully it's, both. But I'm glad that you're working with children, man, because, and I'm sure the children are happy as well. I also want to know, too, of like, all of your ideas that you have when it comes to engaging children, because I see like your puppet shows, and I see all of the cool stuff that you do with the kids, that your kids love it. And like, it becomes this thing of like, I know your parents know about it, but I wish the organization knew, and maybe more parents in the organization knew the kind of great work that you are doing with them, that they pay, thousands of dollars to go to a theater camp where they can just go to River Room with Django and get, a more profound experience. So
it's interesting. I was actually talking about this with one of my students' parents, and when you think about enrichment for preschool, it's things like the tutu school, and there's gymnastics, and all these things that are pretty obvious, and the things that aren't are drama, and even art to an extent, and that people think just too instructionally. Well, they can't listen. I can't direct these children. I can't get it. But the reality is that if you're opportunistic and you're within a program that values emerging ideas and can provoke further inquiry through means that are already known but not accepted outside of the adult realm. Of being, I guess.
Yeah.
Is to introduce the idea of storyboarding with preschool kids, and just putting little pictures in little boxes, and to tell a story pictorially. That's writing, that's literacy. Yeah. They can put a story together. Now, whether they follow that through in their first puppet show, there's going to be some bumps for them, but that goes for anything within performing arts. And I say this all with no formal performing arts background, other than years of sitting on a couch and watching television and having some minimal training. But when you work with young children, you have a freedom to explore these things in a way that's safe for them and fun for them. And all it requires is your investment in time and interest and the right questions at the right time. And that does take years of practice. I wasn't doing this in my 20s. Sure. I was not confident enough for that. I wasn't even doing this really in my 30s. This is all taken many, many, many years of cultivating and reflecting and wondering and practicing. And I will continue to practice until I retire, for sure. But I think it is important that people understand that you can do drama with kids. They need a little bit of seeing you do it. They need a lot of them doing it. Right? They need the right tools, pen, paper, maybe the right kind of paper, using different kinds of materials, introducing it in a way that's engaging to them. And you'll see just amazing things happen with them.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think you're doing it. I think you don't need formal training. You've already kind of figured it out what they would teach you anyway, right? You're teaching children, social emotional skills, and that, like, especially if it comes down to like acting or drama, you have to be emotionally intelligent to be able to portray another emotion besides your own, right? That means it takes some level of awareness that is profound if a child can figure that out. And similarly with storyboarding, it's this planning and this like mindfulness that you're teaching them of like, here's what I plan to do, here's what I want my story to be. And sometimes it deviates and sometimes it's not what you expected or wanted, but it turns out into this other amazing thing because you did plan for it and you were intentional, and it was almost like this meta moment that you're able to teach children, which then helps them reflect on their own life.
I absolutely agree. It's very, and I know people use this word too, ad nauseum, but it's important to use it when it's really true. And for kids to be able to put their thoughts onto paper and represent an idea or a relationship, when it comes to things like a puppet show, it's profoundly impactful. They really are thinking about their thinking. They really are getting outside of their own head, looking at it, and kind of going, huh. Oh, and then this happens. And then the next thing you know, it just snowballs into this really creative process. It's really wonderful to be a part of.
I would love to connect with you more on some puppet stuff, because one of the things that I find challenging, because my goal and my vision for this is to eventually edit all the humans out and make it so a child can listen to this podcast and watch it, right? I do think you need some tools and you need some stuff like make it a puppet, but like I would love if some of the children in River Room would take on those responsibilities, because it's hard. I only have 2 hands, so I can only do so many people, right? But Jenny, I wanted to ask you of like working with infants, what are some of the ways that you like to engage with infants, and what are some of those things that maybe at a younger age developmentally you're still able to kind of capture, similarly to Django, or right? It's like, how are you engaging with them on a different level that maybe somebody who hasn't worked with infants is unaware of?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question. I feel like very passionate about elevating the younger age groups. I think we as an organization do a lot to elevate early learning on its own, but even within early learning, infants and toddlers often do get left out of the conversation. I think it's really easy for adults to identify with preschoolers who are talking and doing things really similar to adults. They're mirroring little adults, and infants and toddlers are as well, but in a very different way, where you have to pay a lot, just a different level of attention. Something that I think is like the most important tool that we use in the younger age groups is just like talking to them. Just really not expecting a verbal answer and response, but talking to them just the exact same way. And actually, this time of year in our classroom has been extremely exciting, because we have been doing this since they started in September, and now it's March and they're starting to respond verbally. So I think you just really can't underestimate this age group, and you really have to just assume their capability and their intelligence and their competence, even if you have to look at them a different way and see them a different way, because they're giving you so many cues, and they're taking it in, and they're putting it out there. I have been really amazed at this one child in our classroom who's just started kind of code switching between his peers, because they're all starting to communicate with each other. I was telling Jamie this earlier today, but it was just really magical. They're all starting to like notice each other and talk, communicate with each other verbally, and this child knows how his peers communicate, so he'll approach one in a different way than he approaches the other. And like that could easily be missed by adults that are busy doing other things or not paying attention to what they're doing, but instead we're watching and we're curious about it. And, we're lucky that we get to have a smaller classroom and smaller ratios and really take our time to watch, but it's so much of the same things, and just because it's basic or simple does not mean it's not still so complex. Like they're learning things for the first time, and can you imagine learning something for the first time and displaying it that way? It's really inspiring, but it takes a lot to really switch adult mindsets about that and communicate and document and reframe, because our society still thinks of infants is something that you can just go like pick up and throw around and all these things, and really they're people doing incredible work. They're doing a lot.
Yeah, I really appreciate you as an educator, and I understand that our wait list is impacted, right? It's very impacted, but I don't think it's necessarily impacted for the reasons that it should, right? Like if people actually knew the work that you were doing with infants, I bet you it would be like a 10-year wait list. Because honestly, like if I were to ever have an infant, I would definitely want you to be their teacher, because like you said, you're uplifting infants and early learning, and you're making us aware of things I was never aware of, right? And similarly, I always just thought, just hold her head. That's all I knew about, being with an infant. But like I go in there now and I do see the differences in personalities, and I do see, like, even now that you're mentioning the code switching, I'm like, wow, it's so crazy to think that I was never aware of that, right? And it's kind of like when you realize that and I don't like, maybe this is a bad comparison, because hopefully I don't, diminish your work or infants for that matter, but like when you hear of like plants and like certain things that are connected that you were never aware of, only because we don't understand the complexity of it does not mean that it's not there. And the reality is it's way more complex than we originally thought, and like beyond our comprehension. So the fact that you're trying to comprehend and then teach others is amazing, and I really appreciate it. I also just love being in that classroom now. I think you make it so inviting and so welcoming, which I really appreciate. And this is something that maybe we'll get in trouble now for saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. But like, I don't spend my time in all the classrooms, right? Like I pick and choose for a reason. A lot of the times it's the way I am made to feel in that classroom. Some are more inviting than others, and I understand, there's ebbs and flows of people's days and schedules that I come in and interrupt, being a silly whatever guy, I get that, but at the same time, I do miss out on those moments that might be happening. And so I really appreciate you, for one, creating that welcoming environment, and also creating that environment for other people. I see all the people who visit Cloud Room, and I see all of our SPU staff and all of our, college students who are going in there, and one, they're learning from an amazing teacher like yourself, but also they're in a place that they feel comfortable and they're happy in, right? And like the fact that you're making infants, children, right? I see the preschoolers come to visit, and you're making adults happy. Like you're hitting every single like age group, and that's really hard to do, and I think you should be proud of that. And I see your team as well, right? I see the Cloud, right, connection, and like I see that you guys have a genuine relationship and you guys genuinely care about each other, and I think that goes a long way with your classroom, because there is this holistic approach, right? And that's only to the benefit of the children. And like now you can focus on some of the more complex stuff when you are working, there's this kind of cohesion that's happening. Like I said, I honestly, if I had the choice, I would always want for you to be my kid's teacher. I don't have a kid, but I want to have one just so you could be the teacher. So seriously, thank you.
No, I really appreciate you calling that out, because my team is amazing, and we're all really nice, and we all excuse me, we all have that like inviting, welcoming attitude, but creating such a welcoming environment was like no accident. It was extremely intentional, especially knowing that all of the caregivers in our classroom are female, and we have one person of color on team and 2 white women caring for these babies. So it was so important to us to have involve the entire community in showing infants right from the start that male teachers are a thing and are safe and should be accepted, and making sure the parents knew that, and having the infants be able to interact with all sorts of different people has been huge, like having older kids come in, having other teachers come in. So I appreciate you saying that, because it was work for us to get that way, and I'm glad it's playing out the way.
No, it's definitely playing out that way. It's funny because like in my family, I went home this past weekend. I went to LA for my niece's birthday party. She turned 4, but a lot of my cousins, and now even my sister is pregnant as well, but like a lot of them just had a baby, and I saw them, and now that I do feel more connected to infants, I was like, oh, can I hold your baby, or can I see them, what's their name? And they immediately started crying, and it was this thing of like, everybody, oh, it's because you're ugly, right? And my thing is like, I don't take that personally, because that's the way I grew up, and like every single baby in my family cried at the man that was looking at it, and it was always because you're ugly, and babies know that, right? And like even with some of my older cousins, I remember my mom would always say that I would cry when they came over when I was a baby because, you know, I wasn't used to, you know, males giving me that same nurturing care that, you know, a woman would. So I appreciate you starting to change that because, you know, yeah, I am ugly, but
You are not.
babies
Stop
can
that.
love me too. But no,
Now you have a whole classroom of infants crying when you leave.
And I love, but again, that's because you were able to like show me that like how unique and how like every single one. I have this thing of like saying hi to every single child, and you know I would do it more in, you know, the school age classrooms, and then kind of trickle down that way. And I never really did it with the toddlers, and like now with the infants. But I do. I make sure I tell them all by their name, and I say hi, you know, so and so, and I make sure that I make eye contact because that little simple connection is also so profound, right? And like same in like in Rainbow, like I have to say goodbye to every single one of them when I leave.
Us too, don't forget us.
Yeah, you guys as well, right?
We need our goodbyes.
But it's also like something that adults need. So why wouldn't a child need that as well, right?
It's like their little way of like reflecting your presence, right? Like you come in and you unpack this person, and this person that brings this new ball of energy, because you know by the time you come into the room, we're like in this weird moment where I've been there like all day long, and we just got done with like 75 diapers, and we're like sweating profusely, and we're doing snack, and it's most likely rice because Ruel hates us. We're like picking every single grain off of the floor. It's a thing. But when you come into the room, and we love it, we love different personalities come into the room. Some personalities come in the room that are a little bit lower or higher. Like it's just great. I think my favorite thing is the window when everybody peeks their head through the kitchen.
Yeah, I love it.
It's everybody's favorite. It's our favorite. But it's really nice when you say goodbye to everybody when you leave. It's your way of like closing the chapter on your visit.
Yeah.
It helps them.
Yeah,
It helps them.
I want them to know. Yeah, I want them to know that I'm leaving, you know, for either the day or whatever, because, you know, a child might not know the difference, and it's like, oh no, is he coming back at all ever, right? But like I think they start to understand what a greeting is, and you know, hello and goodbye, but also that somebody's watching them all the time, and that they're seen, and right, and like
and it's also important. Like we ask our families to do it as well, and we do it as educators. They cry when we say goodbye, but it's so important because it helps them at some point to feel seen, to be validated for what they're feeling. Also, because it also leaves the space for the other educators in the room to validate their feelings as well by showing them compassion, saying, I know that you're upset, and that's okay that you're upset, and it's going to be okay, we're going to see them later, kind of a thing. So there's even in saying goodbye, there's relationship building happening.
Mine especially.
Yeah.
And I love this idea too, that each day is a chapter.
Yeah.
Just,
pretty cool,
play
huh?
off what you're saying is that when kids come to me in the morning in the classroom and like, oh, Jacob, blah, 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 and I just ignore them and I go, hi, hello, good morning. And they're like, oh, and they try to ignore that and they keep going, and it's nothing malicious or anything like that. They're just learning about how to start the day with you, even at the age of 4 and 5 sometimes. And we've worked hard in our classroom to cultivate this welcoming environment. I really don't like it when kids are like, hey, what are you doing here? And I'll say, oh, you mean hello, Alfonso.
Yeah, no, and I see that.
You just forgot that that's how you greet someone when they come. Because they really want to be welcoming, they're just learning how to do it.
Sure.
And so when you're talking about saying goodbye to each and every kid, that kind of intentionality and understanding this important part of our relationship is that over time, many, many, many moons in the future, you won't cry anymore on the room anymore, but it's because of that persistence. And definitely, I agree with you. Jenny and Jamie, both exemplify that. I feel like in your programs, and it makes me feel really good. It empowers me because I've been doing this for a really long time. I'm really sorry when the kids leave at the end of the day. I don't care how many kids I have in the classroom. I'm like, hey, River, let's say bye to you. And there might just be 2 kids like, right.
It's really like that too. And Jago has like the utmost energy to everybody say bye or River say bye to River. And everyone's like, oh God.
It's not always at a 10. I mean, sometimes when I look, you go like, oh,
will say a Django 5 is every other person's 10. So,
Honestly.
No, but you guys are right. I think that is building the relationship, and sometimes when I see adults be like, hold on, or like or completely ignore a child, sometimes that has an effect on them, and then later on when there's a different behavior that maybe you want to correct or redirect or whatever it is, and then like, why aren't you listening? Well, like, how many times did you ignore them when they were just trying to tell you a story? They don't have the social skills maybe to wait their turn when people are speaking, and that's what we have to teach them. But like, that still resonates with them when you're like, when you dismiss them and you brush them off, right? And like later on when you want to talk to them and have that moment, you can't, because you've already established that precedent. Exactly, right? So no, I agree. I also think it's a good way to check in with children, right? Your kids, especially if you say hi to them every single day, and if they give you a different response than you're used to, then something is up here, right? But yeah, it's something that's so simple. Again, back to the simplicity part of it, but it's so profound. I'm getting married this year, and thanks. But we're doing no children at the wedding, which at first I was like, yeah, who cares, whatever. It wasn't a big deal to me. But then it was like, well, my sister, and I want my niece to be there, and I'm going to have a nephew soon, and I want him to be there. So then I was like, well, we'll have a couple of exceptions. And then I went home recently, and I saw my cousin, who he has he has a bunch of things that some adults just can't comprehend and cannot support him with, that I'm maybe just because I work with children, I'm a little bit more equipped to support them in that way. But when I come home, I always make sure I check in with them, and I'm like, how are you doing, and talk to him about school. And he told me once, he's like, wow, you want to talk to me? And that broke my heart, because I'm like, what do you mean, buddy? Like, nobody wants to talk to you? And I told him, I was like, he's like, you're getting married? He's like, you're getting married in Canada? He thinks I live in Canada. And I was like, no, I'm getting married in Seattle. He's like, well, good, because I do not want to miss that. If I miss that, I'm going to be so angry. And it broke my heart, because like, I didn't tell it to him because I couldn't, but I was like, there's no children allowed. So I told my fiance, I'm going to invite him, and I don't care what you say. And she was like, well, that's okay, but now if we cross that threshold, then we're going to have to do the same for others. Yeah. And like, a lot of it is because you'd rather not deal with the whatever about it. Who is that?
I think it's Menahem. Oh, Seamus. Yeah.
But right, and so. But anyway, I do think that's a good way to wrap it up.
Sure.
Do you guys want to kind of any final thoughts? Daytime talk show host style. Final thoughts here with Maury Povich. At the end of the day, children are people too. But
that's right. What a way to wrap it up. That's great.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being a part of it. And if you guys want to do more, just let me know. I honestly don't want to make this a very far away thing that we can't access. I want to make this as easy as possible, because these conversations are important. This was fun, and I think that parents would appreciate it, and families would appreciate it as well. So, thanks, guys.
Thanks, man.